On the 25th of May, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 began rolling down the runway for takeoff. The scheduled flight was due to take around 5 hours, but would, in fact, be in the air for just under a minute before disaster struck. Flight 191 would soon end in the worst single-aircraft aviation disaster ever to take place in the United States. American Airlines, founded in 1930, is the flag carrier airline of the United States. Over the course of its lifetime, it has become the largest passenger-carrying airline in the world. Beginning in the early 1970s, American Airlines started working to maximize the capacity of their long-distance routes, looking to both Boeing and McDonnell Douglas for a solution. After seeing the results of both the Boeing 747 and the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, American Airlines would go on to select the DC-10 as their premier jetliner. The DC-10s of American Airlines had a long and storied career, one that was not without incident. In 1972, shortly after delivery, a DC-10 flying as Flight 96 experienced a cargo door blowout, but was able to return safely with no loss of life. However, this same issue would be the cause of a major disaster on Turkish Airlines Flight 981 just 2 years later. This accident would, unfortunately, not be the last to involve a DC-10. On the 25th of May 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 was scheduled to take off from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, bound for Los Angeles International Airport. The trip was expected to take only 5 hours. On board the flight were 271 people, 258 passengers and 13 crew. The cockpit crew consisted of 53-year-old Captain Walter Lux, 49-year-old First Officer James Dillard, and 56-year-old Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich. All 3 men were highly experienced airline pilots and would be flying a route they had flown many times previously. At 3:04 p.m., clearance was given for takeoff, and First Officer Dillard set the throttles to takeoff speed. The aircraft rolled down runway 32 right, gaining speed until it reached over 100 knots, and then reached V1, the speed at which aborting the takeoff was no longer safely possible. Captain Lux called out, "Rotate," and First Officer Dillard pulled the control column back to lift the plane. At this exact moment, there was a shudder that reverberated throughout the aircraft and a metallic snapping sound. Captain Lux said only one word, "Damn," before the instruments went dead. In the control tower, an air traffic controller looked up in time to witness a shocking sight. The left engine on Flight 191 had separated from the aircraft and slammed into the runway. He provided a shouted report to others in the tower, then immediately called for emergency equipment to be deployed. He attempted to communicate with the stricken aircraft.
American 191 Heavy, you want to come back into what runway?
Soon, both those on the ground and in the tower could see the plane begin to bank to the left before rolling fully onto its left side. This event was captured by 2 different photographers, who happened to be watching at the time. Next, the plane began to fall back to the ground, still on its side, until it slammed into a hangar used as a car shop. The explosion and fire that followed were both enormous, with some eyewitnesses describing it as resembling a rain of fire falling down. Rescue teams quickly reached the site and were initially under the impression that the nearby Standard Oil petroleum plant was ablaze. It quickly became apparent instead that a commercial jet had crashed. Firefighters brought the flames under control and then began to look for survivors. It was, however, soon very clear that no one was left alive in the scattered debris. All 271 people on board were killed. Additionally, 2 car mechanics who had been at work inside the hangar at the time of the crash were also killed. The burning debris from the crash set fire to a trailer park behind the airport and caused considerable damage but no further deaths on the ground. The crash of Flight 191 was, at the time, and still is, the most deadly single aircraft accident in US aviation history. The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, began an investigation. From the start, it was clear that the engine had separated from the rest of the plane and that this had caused the aircraft to crash. But there were still questions that remained. How and why did the engine separate? Had it ever been possible for the pilots to save the plane? And, most pertinently, who was responsible for the accident? The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, ordered that all DC-10s be grounded, and any foreign-operated DC-10s not be allowed to enter US airspace. Soon, pictures of the doomed flight appeared in newspapers across the country. These two events coincided to cause public perception of the safety record of the DC-10 to sharply decline. In the months that followed, many passengers all over the world would avoid any flight that used a DC-10. At first, the cause of the engine separation was thought to be a fractured bolt found on the runway. This theory was announced at a press conference before the root cause was later found not to be related to the damaged bolt. To find the true cause of the disaster, investigators turned their attention to the black boxes on the aircraft, both of which yielded problematic results. The cockpit voice recorder cut out right after Captain Lux's exclamation of, "Damn." It had been powered by the left engine, and so had lost power at the moment the engine separated. The flight data recorder, on the other hand, produced information that was scrambled and difficult to interpret because of the aircraft's extreme and unnatural flight path. Further scrutiny of the engine found several dents that had not been caused by the impact onto the runway. Following this lead, it was found that the aircraft, and specifically the engine, had undergone maintenance at the American Airlines maintenance facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 2 months prior to the crash. This was part of a C-check, a routine, comprehensive inspection of systems on board an aircraft, usually scheduled every 12 to 18 months. Investigation of the maintenance facility led to a troubling discovery. It was found that maintenance personnel had not been following the standard guidelines for repairing an engine. Instead of detaching the engine from its support, known as a pylon for maintenance, they were taking off the entire engine assembly with the pylon attached. After maintenance was complete, it would then be reattached using a forklift. This crude method of reattachment could cause the pylon to become improperly aligned with its locking pins, resulting in the pins being bent. On top of this, it was easy to accidentally slam the pylon into place, damaging it and creating microscopic stress fractures. It was not only American Airlines personnel who were using this shortcut. The staff of Continental Airlines were also routinely detaching and reattaching engines using the same method. With the DC-10 grounding still in effect, emergency repairs were enacted across the fleets of both airlines. Many planes were found to have stress fractures, some of which were dangerously close to expanding into a breakage. With the root cause now determined, the actions of the pilots were scrutinized. There was some speculation that they could have returned to the airport without incident. Aircraft that are certified in commercial aviation are designed to be able to fly using only one engine in an emergency. Flight 191 still had 2 working engines when it crashed. While it may never be known with absolute certainty what happened on the flight, the QRH, or Quick Reference Handbook, did shed some light on what most likely happened. In the event of an engine failure, the QRH instructed pilots to slow their speed ready for an emergency landing. In the case of this accident, there was no way for the flight crew to know they had physically lost an engine, and therefore should have instead maintained speed to keep the aircraft aerodynamically balanced. In photographs taken right before impact, a trail of white mist is visible. This was found to be hydraulic fluid. The loss of hydraulic fluid would have caused the flaps and slats on the left side of the plane to revert to a neutral position. With the right flaps and slats positioned to slow the plane down, the imbalance in airflow and lack of speed would have easily caused the plane to enter a stall and roll onto its side. One final question that emerged was, why didn't the crew know they were stalling? This was answered by the loss of the cockpit voice recorder. It was not the only system linked to the left engine of the plane. So too was the captain's stick shaker or stall warning system. At the time, it was not required that both control columns be equipped with stick shakers, or that power for the stick shakers was to be drawn from all engines. The option to have both control columns equipped with stick shakers was offered by the manufacturer McDonnell Douglas, but American Airlines had opted out. The NTSB concluded that the simplified, non-recommended maintenance procedure carried out by American Airlines was the root cause of the disaster, and that the flight crew had acted appropriately given their knowledge of the situation. American Airlines was fined $500,000, the equivalent of $1.6 million today, and orders were issued by the FAA, at the recommendation of the NTSB, that more strict protocols be enforced on airlines regarding aircraft maintenance. It was also mandated that electrical systems be powered by all engines on a given aircraft, not just one. In addition to this, both the pilot and the co-pilot were now required to have stick shakers, and automatic safety valves were to be fitted on hydraulic lines to prevent a loss of pressure should they become severed. The FAA was heavily criticized for its lax monitoring of airline maintenance practices. The crew chief who supervised the aircraft during its final inspection before the disaster, a man named Earl Russell Marshall, would later take his own life. American Airlines continued to use the DC-10 until the year 2000, around which time it was displaced by newer and more efficient jets. The location of the disaster would remain unused until 2011, when a permanent memorial was constructed. O'Hare International Airport remains a bustling airport to this day, but it is one that is forever remembered as the location where 271 passengers lost their lives.